Good evening and welcome to the Minions of the Zoo Nightstream podcast. I don't know what it is anymore. I am your keeper and host, the Harry Channel, and with me tonight are minions Prospero.
Hello.
SkepTok.
Hi, everybody.
Sora Luna.
Good evening.
Geodes.
Hello.
And DrFunctional.
I am neither a doctor nor a functional.
Maybe someday you can be Dr. Fully Functional. Let's see. Well, it is 9/11. It's the anniversary, so asking people how they are is kind of pointless because everybody feels kind of crappy because we're thinking back on what a shit day that was. And we are not, unlike just about every other show on the internet, going to spend a bunch of time talking about 9/11. We actually have a huge amount of show. Turns out I had to rearrange about 1/4 of the schedule about 20 minutes ago, so it should be a bit of an adventure for everybody. But I did want to mention one thing about 9/11 that most people don't talk about very often, which is this article. So what happened was, after 9/11 for several days, there was no air traffic except for the Saudi royal family in the U.S. and or the Bin Ladens, excuse me, in the U.S. and military aircraft. All of the commercial aviation pretty much worldwide stopped, certainly over most of North America. And that actually changed things, and it gave us a unique opportunity to do something which we don't get to do, which is see, hey, I wonder how much effect all of this air traffic is having on our weather, because it creates a lot of high cirrus clouds. So fire up the satellites and start doing some unique stuff, because there was no other time to do this, and hopefully there'll never be another time to do this. Officials at the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration did the only thing they could to try to control the situation, ordering every aircraft in U.S. airspace, about 44,000 of them, to land somewhere, anywhere, immediately. Canadian officials followed. Airports in Atlantic Canada quickly filled with thousands of bewildered people who had been flying west across the Atlantic from Europe, but found themselves stranded in Goose Bay, Labrador, or Stephenville, Newfoundland. Within hours, the skies across the continent were empty except for military aircraft.
Story.
So the question is, do all these jet trails change weather patterns? So they started studying this. And I'm actually kind of surprised people don't talk about this more often.
I have not heard about this. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So what they basically do is they end up contributing to cloud cover during the day, which reduces the temperature a little bit. And then at night, it actually traps heat, the infrared from the cooling Earth, from going out into space. So it acts like the nice little blanket at night. So it tends, it tends, well, back to the Earth. So it tends to make the difference between the daytime and the nighttime temperature less than it would be otherwise. And so the effect during the 3 days the flights were grounded was strongest in populated regions where air traffic was normally densest. The increase in range came to about 2 degrees Celsius. 2 degrees. Other studies have tended to back up the research. In 2011, British scientists wrote that an air raid on May 1944 involving over 1,400 aircraft measurably lowered daytime temperatures in England. In that case, the situation was the reverse of 9/11. Large-scale air travel was unknown, and dense concentrations of large planes were rare. In 2004, NASA scientist Patrick Minnis wrote, the increased cirrus coverage attributable to air traffic could account for nearly all of the warming observed over the United States for nearly 20 years starting in 1975. Minnis also argued that a steady increase in cloud cover over the United States, about 1% a decade, was due to increasing air travel. He also found that increases in cloud cover were more pronounced in populated areas and stronger in winter when contrails are bigger. The warming effect happened because the high-altitude clouds that contrails created tended to trap warm air, Minnis wrote. On balance, though contrails can be both warm and cool, there is more of a warming effect. The link will be in the description after the show. I just think this is kind of an interesting thing and probably the one bit of 9/11 that nobody else is talking about.
Yeah, it was a very interesting thing not to have any planes in the air. The other thing that it did was it exposed all the UFOs, because anything that was up there obviously was a UFO. And
It was like ALF or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Looking for cats.
UFO sightings actually went down.
And of course they did.
Oddly enough. Anyway,
Oddly
just
enough.
like throw that in.
So I just kind of sprung this on everybody at the. I don't think anybody even knew I was going to cover this. Are there any questions before I move on?
No,
No, it
that's pretty self-explanatory.
pretty self-explanatory. The thing is, weather's complicated and climate's hard, and a lot of people have opinions. But the fact of the matter is, the stuff that's going on in China and how it changes the clouds and the contributions of things other than CO2, like water vapor and CFCs and all this, it's extremely complicated, and it's going to take a while to figure this crap out. So anybody who tells you they know with absolute certainty what's going on with the climate is lying to you, or themselves, or both.
Yeah, put both your hands on your wallet immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our President Biden was extremely busy this week, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this either. So
on, man.
apparently he signed executive orders requiring COVID vaccine for federal employees and government contractors and companies with more than 100 employees.
Yeah, via OSHA.
Yeah.
Yeah, via the Department of Labor putting the screws to them.
Yeah, and we're actually going to talk about that in a lot more depth on Tuesday's show. I think it sounds like we discussed that a bit of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I'm hoping the state filings will be in by then, since they're adding up.
Yeah, we're going to have, I think, a pretty darn interesting discussion come Tuesday's show about this. But it is interesting that even though he seems to think he has huge amounts of authority, it doesn't seem to really extend as far as one might expect. Postal workers apparently aren't part of this deal.
Well,
You know,
they're,
people
they're
that
not
go
a
from
federal,
house to house.
They're not a federal agency. They're an NGO.
Well, neither are these 100 Pearson companies.
Yeah, they're also union, by the way. That's what's really going on.
Absolutely. And also Congress, which is also a union or a parliament of whores. I borrowed that from PJ O'Rourke.
I was just going to say
credit.
PJ.
Yeah.
Are also exempt. Isn't this lovely? Fuck these people with their mandates.
Yeah, well, Congress is exempt because reasons. Apparently, he has no control over Congress, right? Okay. And
No, there's no liaison at all from Capitol Hill to the White House. None. There never has been. No, doesn't happen. That's why we need executive orders.
yeah. And I think the one thing, and we're going to have lots of links in the chat here that I particularly enjoyed was do they realize we have video of all this department? Nancy Pelosi back in April was busy saying, we cannot require somebody to be vaccinated. That's just not what we can do.
Joseph R. Biden was also very busy telling us he was not going to mandate a vaccine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joseph Robinette Biden?
Robinette, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you doing with that? What are you doing with the Treasury, Robinette?
Yeah.
No, I almost don't want to talk about the 9/11 ceremonies because somebody's probably going to keep track of the number of times he looked at his watch. What do you bet they took his watch away from him today?
I don't know, because they certainly had the Rogues Gallery down there, didn't they?
Yeah, I bet they took his watch away so we wouldn't look at it.
Gotta get those photo ops.
The last guy, the one that Blue Anon says was never president, but wants us to, of course, fully endorse their boy, chose a different path today.
Yeah.
Yeah, W was at Shanksville. Clinton, Obama, and Biden, the best of the best, were in New York. And Trump was also in New York, just making his own private visits.
Yeah. Yep. Well,
I saw all those Democrats in one place in New York, and I got to thinking about 5-inch guns.
That was a really good show. I really enjoyed that. Designated Survivor.
Yes, I binge watched that. I liked it too. But
Yes,
anyway, I didn't mean to get you off.
No,
off topic there, Harry.
Kiefer Sutherland is actually pretty good.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the premise of the show is something that Skep just alluded to, and I mean, having that sort of, I hate using the word, but reset might be nice.
Having
Anyway.
a Secretary of Agriculture, whoever it is, would be a trade up from President Leghair.
Yes. I'm ready to vote for Corn Pop, even though he was a very bad dude.
Yeah.
That's right.
I know about roaches.
Yeah.
All right.
Whatever.
Let's keep this
Corn
bus
Pop was
moving.
a bad dude.
All right.
So we have time for everybody's special projects later.
Yes.
See, that would be the same thing. If clicking on the same thing twice doesn't really get me extra credit. Okay. I do want to talk about this briefly. Joe Rogan and his miraculous recovery. This is a perfect example of the kind of horseshit arguments that have been put out there.
Horseshit. I see what you did there.
Joe Rogan's COVID-19 recovery shows how much the right has bought into the widely discredited horse dewormer cure. Oh, you mean the medication that has had over 3 billion human doses administered over the last couple decades?
And
Yeah,
won,
and
the,
also-
mean that
and
horse
won the
dewormer.
Nobel Prize in 2015
Yeah.
for its application in treatment of humans.
And happens to have an additional application as a horse dewormer because it's just hell on parasites.
And
Fuck's
like a
sake.
lot of different medications in different formulas and in different volumes are actually really good for our animal friends. Like, what's the active ingredient in Advil? Acetaminophen? Ibuprofen?
Yeah.
I mean,
Ibuprofen.
you know, in a large enough quantity can do hell with a dog's system, but in a tiny amount can help with their recovery from things like surgery.
Well, yeah,
Ideally-
it's anti-inflammatory. That's right.
Ideally, you don't usually give ibuprofen to dogs. You'd give them carprofen or something like that. Which
Probably-
is a slightly different chemical tuned
Yes.
to the canine whatever. But yeah, if your vet tells you to give a dog a small amount of this stuff, yeah, you're fine.
Yeah.
The weird thing is that people are showing this sudden forgetfulness about the off-label uses of drugs that has occurred throughout time. Skep's discussed this. Crazy as a shithouse rat.
Mhm.
Rat poison is now prescribed to humans as a blood thinner. We like to call it warfarin.
Yep.
And there are a fuck ton of people who lived a lot longer than they would because of, oh my God, rat poison.
Yeah, I wish I had a deep voice like Monkey, so I could, you know, the thing they don't tell you, and do that whole thing. But no, it's absolutely true. Or you go back to, what was it, Food Babe, going after Subway sandwiches because some ingredient that was a dough conditioner was also used in the manufacture of yoga mats. You wouldn't eat a yoga mat, would you? It's just
Yeah.
it's the
God's
laziest
sake.
propaganda, just one step away from the truth. Well, it's truth adjacent, right?
there's carbon atoms?
It's the formaldehyde in the vaccines argument. It's like your body manufactures formaldehyde, you twats. But that's just, you're not going to even...
It's like people, I only eat food that has been touched by organic chemicals. Well, have a hearty glass of Roundup. Dumb shit.
Well, hearty glass of Roundup, actually glyphosate in regular, like what you and I would buy at Home Depot kind of Roundup isn't going to do a goddamn thing to you, regardless of a jury's decision in California.
And don't drink glyphosate. But
Please,
yes,
please don't drink
Roundup,
glyphosate.
please.
But
it
if
is
you
not-
get up in the morning and there's no breeze and you put some little plastic baggies on your shoes and you go out and you spray glyphosate and you wash your hands afterwards, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, just
It's
like you
gonna be
would
fine.
handling any other
Or if you don't wash your hands.
I especially like how this article turns it into a right v left political issue as opposed to, hey, he got COVID, he took some drugs, and he's in amazing physical shape. He got better really quickly. The end. But no, they have to turn it into
a huge so what, right?
Yeah, he also took an antibody cocktail infusion. He did a whole bunch of things. Nobody here is claiming that the I word, that ivermectin, is the thing that helped him knock this thing. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I'm not qualified to say. But the point is that this is extremely irresponsible journalism. That I think I can say with a fair degree of
it is precisely a redo, and I don't know why people just aren't laughing at it wholesale. It's a complete redo of the HCQ fish tank.
Yeah, yeah, and this is Business Insider. Business Insider. You would think they would skew at least to the center, right? But no, this is just progressive propaganda in the Business Journal.
They want virtue signal too, and that's happening more and more in business. It's really disappointing.
Well,
it is really disappointing.
AP tripped all over themselves to tell everyone that ibuprofen does not cause sterility in males, because that was something they got to go fact check, but to fact check the number of peer-reviewed studies that have been done around the world, and that's kind of beyond them, because that would require them having somebody working for AP who could read and comprehend those things, and we don't want that. Do you understand?
Wouldn't it be funny if it was caused reversible sterility in men, and ivermectin became the male pill that people have been looking for?
That would be fucking hilarious.
I'm an ivermectin man.
Yeah.
Ivermectin man.
All right.
Ivermectin man, you're so virile.
So there's another section. The next section is titled "At Least We're Not ... and living in Australia, because this is terrible. New South Wales health limits residents of lockdown tower block to 6 beers per day.
Good Christ!
If they were the right 6 beers per day, that could definitely get the job done. You know, like 6 San Miklauses would be fine. 6 Trappist ales would probably get the job done.
I'd say 6 bottles of Shemai would work, because they're all big bottles.
Here's the problem: is that 6 bottles for a 100-pound woman, and 6 bottles for a 250-pound, athlete. This is why government is so bad at this kind of stuff. They take pictures when they need to be taking movies, because things develop, things change, and things require much more nimbleness than a government can provide. That's why governments do nothing very well, and you should minimize the participation of government in any enterprise. It should always be the goal to keep it to a minimum. There are some things where it's unavoidable. It's simply the only place where you can get stuff done. It's the right rational choice. But instead of leading with the government, having government solve all your problems, which seems to be the path we're heading down, what we should be doing is heading down the path of how can we get government out of this business. And when government is involved, how can we make it the most localized part of government, to reflect the local mores and culture and so forth, so that it provides the most utility to the populace, instead of providing the most control by the government and the most secure hold on the money-making appliances in society, which is what really motivates the decisions at the top. Sorry about the rant there.
Well, no. But I do
have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Is it all alcohol or merely beer?
No. Residents are allowed to receive a ration of one of the following: 6 beers or pre-mixed drinks, 1 bottle of wine, or 1 375 milliliter bottle of spirits. What I want to know is, will they deliver any brewer's yeast, any malt syrup?
Yes, exactly. Hey, you're reading my mind.
I think there's always a way around this sort of thing. But this is why, as part of my preps, because I do have some preparations made, I have a lot of alcohol. Whether I drink it or trade it doesn't really matter. Alcohol is a great thing to add to your disaster preparedness.
Absolutely.
Even if it's just to deal with the boredom of being locked up in Australia.
Well, if you're also, I mean, you hate to say this, but if you're carrying a bottle of whiskey with you and you slice yourself open in a dirty environment, it isn't the worst thing you can use to flush out the wound.
No, it's excellent. It
You
hurts
know,
like hell, but it's excellent.
Yeah, it's just like in having honey to aid, in
honey's an antibiotic. For God's sake.
Yeah, to protect the wound from infection, and those are. This is just the blue noses. The government is just where they go because someone somewhere is having a good time.
And they can't.
And it must be at the expense of other people. They have this, how they have that same economic single pie, zero sum point of view?
Oh, yeah.
They had the same about happiness. Now, I had wondered whether the problem is that the authorities who are in the streets making sure nobody is out after a certain hour in New South Wales did not want them being peppered with beer bottles from a tower block because,
they don't have guns.
What if they're secretly running out of beer in Australia and they know that there will be the whole country will revolt?
Oh, yeah.
Once they start running out of beer, it's like, well, because a consequence of the lockdown, we're now rationing beer because we don't have enough to go around.
That would be the end of Canada.
That would be the breaking point for Australia.
But in fact, it's the government that's revolting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Sora, are you around or are you chasing dogs? You're muted.
I am here.
So, any inklings of your fascist regime going to do anything like this to you guys?
I mean, if you got the QR code, shouldn't need to. But we'll see.
Well, this just seemed almost like a Canadian thing they would do, where they would just start mandating what your alcohol intake would be by the government as part of, I don't know, being a patriotic Canadian.
Maybe, I don't know if on the West Coast.
Yeah. If it were France, they'd be mandating you have to drink more.
Yeah. That's one thing I like about the French.
I have this feeling that it might, if they start doing something like that, it might be seen as, I don't know, like racist or something like that. Or.
Oh. Yeah.
It took me a minute, and then I realized,
You're saying that they might be accused of trying to take somebody's fire water?
Maybe.
Okay.
So you went there, Harry.
Hey.
At least
I'm speaking in code. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Juice.
Like on one hand, it'll be seen as, oh, that's super stereotyping. On the other hand, is just like, why are you trying to limit already limited resources in isolated communities? So,
meanwhile, Russia just laughs.
Yeah.
Well, it just sets a terrible precedent. It's like, I may agree with things in principle. I may agree with the outcome. But that doesn't mean that I support the methods to get to the outcome. I mean, I think generally the vaccine is safe and effective if administered appropriately and people take the correct precautions afterwards. Generally. But that doesn't mean I'm going to force it on people. Any more so than I think it's probably a good idea to not drink more than 6 beers a day. But that doesn't mean it's any of my business to stop some bored person who's there from drinking 6 beers. Not to mention some beers are really weak.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really weak. I mean, 375 milliliters of alcohol, of hard liquor a day is a much more substantial amount of alcohol than 6 Bud Lights.
No shit.
Anyway, not to belabor this point too far. Let's see, where are we on time? We're doing great. China is
we can
asshole.
Fix that, Harry.
Yes, China is asshole. China bans all new video games as it warns children are addicted to electronic drugs. China authorities have banned all new video games from being released indefinitely as the government attempts to tackle what it calls gaming addiction in the under 18s.
They're so cute when they try like that.
The suspension was revealed at a meeting with game company Tencent. I'm sure Tencent received that really well. No video games will be released for the foreseeable future in China.
What the
Okay.
fuck?
Yep. Well, I mean, this comes around the tail end of them restricting it to 3 hours a week for people. So that's great. I mean,
But-
yeah.
Like 3 hours online a week or something? Like how the hell would they know?
Well, it's because when Steam split off and they created their version of Steam for China and then allowed the international version for everyone else, there are a handful of video games on the Chinese Steam application. And now they're starting to mandate what happens within those games. So 3 hours a week, like the companies are going to have to build applications to keep track of the amount of time people are online and all kinds of other stuff. So
Why would
Even
they even
single-
do business in a country that demanded that of them is beyond.
Well, why does anybody do
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
in China? Because they want to make huge amounts of money. Here on my spreadsheet, it says Chinese population times number equals big.
Yeah.
And then that's how you always justify
Well said.
doing business in China. But no, the games, there are MMO games or games that, multiplayer games always have a network component, right?
Yep.
Single player games may or may not have a network component, but what they're pushing for is for all games,
To have
whether
a
they're
network.
single player or not, to have a network component. Now, in China, I know this will come as a shock to you, they have an awareness that people pirate things, but they don't want their stuff being pirated. So
Not
the reason
China.
that single player games often in China have an apparatus that basically phones home for licensing purposes is because they're trying to make money, because if otherwise it would just get pirated indefinitely and then nobody would make any money at all in China. So a lot of the single player games phone home as well. So having a thing that just keeps track of the amount of time a person has played and then essentially rescinds their license temporarily until they've accrued enough social credit points or whatever it is they need or time's gone by is actually really easy. I mean,
Yeah.
super easy.
yeah.
Yeah. Barely an inconvenience.
Yeah.
Elwin in chat here is saying that the DSM is actually trying to put video game addiction as a diagnosis, though I'm not exactly sure how they measure it. Obviously, if it disrupts your life, but it seems a bit of a stretch.
It's I mean, the problem is with video game addiction, it's closer to similar to like a food addiction or other things like that, where it's like it more depends on the person's
binging?
personality. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there are mechanics that some games implement for gambling and stuff like that, and they associate it to ties with that. And there's been some talk about what to do in those cases, but again, a lot of it's mostly government oversight, which is always a great start.
Well,
I'll
classic,
tell you though,
classic England in England, the classic video gamers, frequently their video gaming addiction was on the spectrum.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Yeah.
as someone who's had experience with
That's a joke for old people. Okay,
Fun-
sorry, go on.
fun time chemicals and someone who's well versed with video games, there is that adrenaline, that dopamine rush. If you do really well, there's that constant surge of adrenaline. It is, I mean, these are things that we know can cause addiction in the I
Yeah,
guess,
it's
air quotes,
actually
wrong-
generates endorphins.
endorphins.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, in air quotes, the wrong kind of people, and it is something that is very subjective from person to person. As someone who doesn't really have what you would call an addictive personality, I still find that maybe sometimes you just got to like step away and be like, dude, I've been playing this game for 12 hours. What is wrong with me? And kind of like reflect, go, okay, look a little bit back. Now, have I done that all week? No, then okay, maybe it was just a one-time thing and I was really into this story or setting or whatever. Be careful, people. It can sneak up on you.
Yeah.
It can be very addictive.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of things that sneak up on you, the next topic's
well-
coming, but go ahead. I think who's trying to talk? Geos?
Just me, yeah. No, the one thing I would add as well, just briefly, is that one of the most frustrating things about all this is there, of course, the games journalists in the West have come out in force and saying, this what China is doing is not such a bad idea. Maybe we should implement it here. And it's just like, oh God.
You mean those same people who have no problem with the Uyghur death camps?
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah. Yeah,
it's just
Shocking.
they're just giving the Uyghurs more freedom. That's the ACLU rationalization for it. Okay.
exactly.
So let's see. Another quick one. We're just blasting through these articles right now. Larry Elder, some white woman in a black-faced gorilla mask started throwing eggs at Larry Elder, one of the Republicans running against Gavin Newsom in the recall election.
The bitch missed from like 3 feet away.
Yeah, she did not throw well. She didn't. No, it was not. The attack itself was not particularly interesting.
No.
What I find interesting is that, depending on the political side that the media is on, they're either covering it or not covering it. Because the people on the right are covering it like it's some hate crime that needs to be addressed. Because obviously, if somebody a white woman wearing a gorilla mask was throwing eggs at pick somebody like books. What's his name? Cory Booker. They would immediately, the headline would be something along the lines of black-faced Karen, throws eggs at
viciously attacks Cory
viciously
Booker.
attacks, and it would just be like that. But here it's just crickets. You can't really hear much of anything. And
Okay, we probably need to say this was not a blackface type of crime. The mask itself was dark colored, okay, but it was if there is such a thing, a normal gorilla face, and then had a pink wig on top. But we don't want to impugn a racial thing into this. Well, because we don't want somebody to come back and strike us for violating community guidelines.
I'm simply saying that because of who they attacked, because he's the new black face of white supremacy, the coverage is very, very different. Because the press is
and that's from the Los Angeles Times, by the way. They called him a white supremacist. They called him a white supremacist. The world is
terrible.
The world has left me behind. Yes, I'm sorry. Sometimes I just get so amazed I have to emote. Sorry about that, Eric.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to dropping off my ballot on Monday, and that's all I can really do. Let's see, 35 minutes in. So, as I predicted, today, and I told you so, by defeating Newsom recall, pro-choice women would send a powerful message. Gavin Newsom, the Democratic governor of California, is a good man, a good governor, and a leading voice for the principles and values of a large majority of Californians and Democrats across America. This is why Democrats, from Senator Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to President Biden and Vice President Harris and former President Obama, have so strongly united behind him. Larry Elder, the far-right conservative who would almost certainly become governor if the vote to recall Newsom passes, is a prime example of what has gone wrong with conservatism and republicanism. He has made repeatedly false statements on multiple issues.
Oh, no.
They fact-checked him. Oh, did they? They fact-checked him.
Yeah,
I
stop.
know.
What's
wait,
gone
hold
wrong?
On. Here comes the point. I promise. It's almost there, and then you've got it. Female voters, working class voters, black voters, Hispanic voters, young voters, and supporters of same-sex marriage have a stake in the California recall campaign that is enormous and incalculable. Go away, the hill. Okay. So basically what this thing does is it starts talking about the Texas law and trying to say, be very, very afraid, because if you vote for this man, you're going to lose your abortion rights in California. Via what mechanism would Governor Larry Elder be able to impact the accessibility of abortions in California one iota?
He doesn't have that ability except for his moral suasion over the state legislature, and that's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen.
Here's the contradiction that was really early on in this article when they talk about what a champion of females Gavin Newsom is. This guy, while he was married to Kimberly Guilfoyle, okay, had as his campaign manager his lifelong best friend. His best friend, his BFF, was his campaign manager. That's not uncommon in politics. What is uncommon is for Gavin Newsom to seduce his campaign manager's wife, break up their marriage, and break up his own marriage. That's the level of responsibility that this asshole has.
Yeah. So what were you going to say, Prospero? I'm sorry.
I was going to say the thing that's gone wrong is they've got a person of color who's left the plantation.
Yeah.
They're angry as hell that the Republicans have any black people. They don't understand it. They really don't, because they bought into that great party switch and the blah, 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 blah that they've been fed for years about how every single Democrat who was a plantation Democrat became a Republican overnight, which is an enormous lie. It is an enormous lie. Every single one of the Republican presidential candidates prior to George W. Bush, and his purely because of his age, was a Republican at the time that the Civil Rights Act was passed. They were already Republicans. It was the Republicans doing a lot of the pushing.
Are you kidding? LBJ had to get dragged, kicking, and screaming to get on board Martin Luther King's drive for the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
And this big lie that they have told about the big switch, what they've done is they've taken Nixon's Southern strategy, and that some of the Dixiecrats became Republicans, and turned it into some kind of national phenomenon that did not occur. It absolutely did not occur. And it's fucking ridiculous. I mean, Condoleezza Rice's parents were Republicans.
Yes.
Hence, she was a Republican. Condi was a kid in school when the school bombing took place.
The church bombing.
The church bombing that killed schoolmates.
They killed six. One of whom was one of her best friends.
I believe it was just a classmate, but it doesn't matter because it's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then they called him the black face of white supremacy, as if he joined the Republican Party when the whole new white supremacist shit that they suddenly magically had found manifested. Larry Elder's been a Republican for ages and ages and ages. It's just utterly ridiculous. And
yes.
I hate the way the press is handling this.
Oh, let's see. Raymond Lewis is saying, wait, Gavin Newsom and Kimberly Guilfoyle from the Five? Yes. That is the same Kimberly. He has become worse and she's become smarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the same one.
Same one. Absolutely.
Yep. All right. So, so basically, this particular article, which I will point out is an opinion piece, not necessarily a news article, is an opinion piece, is essentially saying that because Texas Republicans bad, it gave them a whole new thing to talk about in the recall election, because up until this point, just about every argument I've seen has been of the form, Republicans are big doo-doo heads, and if you vote against Newsom in the recall, then you are a big doo-doo head as well. That's been their whole argument. You don't hear them going around talking about all the great things he's accomplished or what a fantastic job he's doing. He doesn't have any accomplishments to really point at. There's nothing in his record that says this is the guy who should be governor of California. All they've got is, well, Republicans want him out, therefore he must be good. which is a pretty weak position. But now they've got the boogeyman of the. They're going to make a full meal out of the boogeyman of the Texas abortion law. So, and this is going to happen all over the country.
Yeah, he'll be fine, Harry. He's got Kamala backing him.
Yeah.
Great. So.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great if that helped move the needle against him?
Yeah, that's sort of what I was hoping for. If anything can happen. But here's my girl Lizzie. She's in the news again, and I always just go back to this story because I'm just fascinated by it. Elizabeth Holmes drawn as a villain, underdog as trial begins. So
she did nothing wrong.
This is the discredited founder and president of Theranos once again, and apparently she did nothing wrong. And so this is going on in San Jose right now, and I'm keeping a pretty close eye on this trial, mostly because I think for everybody's safety, we need to know where she is at all times. It's just another thing. She is just such a high-functioning sociopath, my amateur opinion, by the way, that, this is just amazing. She was trying to blame her ex-boyfriend, who was about 20 years older than her, who helped her bankroll everything the last time, but now she's just a victim. Oh God. So anyway, this is a great thing. There are documentaries about it. I think wasn't there a Netflix drama about this as well?
Don't ask me.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'm
anyway.
not sure, but I can see this is the kind of schlock Netflix likes to make specials of.
I'm very much looking forward. I want to see what happens in this case because I really don't want her to get off. To get a sentence that isn't sort of commensurate with the things that she did. Like lying to investors and just sort of faking the results. It's just not good. Anyway. This is actually a good thing, and I'm not really the most passionate person about this, so I'm going to kind of keep quiet. But from what I could tell, David Chipman was a complete chucklehead. And had no business being in charge of the ATF. Like, this is one of the worst nominations I've ever seen.
It's a bloodthirsty motherfucker. Chucklehead is not the term I would use.
Well, can you tell everybody a little bit about why it's awesome that he got his nomination?
This is a guy who gets hard watching replays of the Branch Davidian compound burn.
Yeah.
I mean, he is by his words and the joy he has taken in the shall we say, draconian behavior of law enforcement in this country, particularly if it's federal. He's not even a high-functioning sociopath. He weighs his freak flag a little too high. Yeah. He would round up citizens and put them in camps without a moment's hesitation. He's that kind of guy.
And he's a big gun grabber in addition, because he's sort of like, well, I can't really tell you what an assault rifle is, but I'll know it when I see it.
Yeah.
That's basically his philosophy to these things.
He doesn't want anyone having guns that might interrupt his quest to put the boot on their neck. He is a freak authoritarian.
Yep. For anybody who wants a bit of a funny compilation of him being dismantled when he was in front of government officials trying to judge him, Brandon Torres' gun meme review of David Chipman's pretty good. So.
So, I don't feel like this story has a whole bunch of gas. Bad guy, nomination withdrawn. At least one less thing to worry about, because God knows they screwed up the Interior Department enough. We don't need to get into that right now.
Who is the?
Go ahead.
Who's going to be nominated in his place?
Well, that's a darn good question.
Yeah, so that's something to think about, something to worry about. I just wanted to throw something on the worry pile. If we,
yeah, the fact that anybody floated this guy is kind of scary in the first place, though, because his utterances. His past utterances alone were enough to hang him. It's like they didn't even vet what the optics on this would be. I think they thought they had the Capitol hopping off of January 6th to go for a hard ass. And it sputtered and died very, very quickly.
Yeah. It did. Not a
The
lot.
man's
Of,
past stands against him. I mean, it does. And it's
well, there's plenty of video of him just sort of standing over smoking rubble at Waco.
Yeah,
Thinking like he's Rambo or something. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Smiling with his hands in his pockets.
Yeah, a bunch of people died, you asshole.
No, he was happy they did.
Yeah. He's
Yeah,
very
including
happy.
all the little kids.
Yes.
Yes, especially them.
They were the fruit of the poisonous tree in his mind.
They really deserved it.
Well, let me go ahead and segue to the next thing, which is a lot of fun. Now, I was thinking about the Afghanistan situation, right? And this is not talking about any particular individual, but it seems like in a lot of ways the way we fight wars like that isn't really so much as wars, more like these military engagements. And we're kind of almost running it like it's the business of war. You know, you go in with overwhelming strength, you establish air superiority, you have better weapons, so that's a force multiplier for your people. We just have this pattern now. This is how we fight. And we throw a ridiculous amount of money at this stuff to try to achieve whatever's going on. But I don't think, except right after 9/11, most people in the United States had any real fear that somehow what was going on in Afghanistan was going to affect them here in the United States. We weren't fighting that war like it was an existential threat like World War II was. During World War II, you could tell that it was a very different situation because the brakes were just off. Any kind of crazy idea that might win the war or help at all, they were just going to go for it. I mean, convention wasn't even an option for these people because everybody sort of thought, I'm fighting for my very existence. So I started thinking about some of the crazy and amazing and innovative things that they did during World War II. And I thought that might be fun to actually talk about some of those projects. So I assigned to some volunteers 4 different subjects, 2 of which are going to be handled by DrFunctional, then 1 by SkepTok, and then 1 by Sora Luna. And I think they're all kind of interesting. I think they're all kind of fun. So we're going to do something a little different. And why don't you start things off, Functional? And if you have anything you want me to display, just put it in the private chat, any links.
Yeah, just the pictures.
I mean, I have the first thing here, which is
oh, you have them?
The balloon bomb thing here. I think this is the first article you want to go with.
No, look in the side chat. I think I can see the wrong one.
Well, you start talking. I'll
okay.
Load
So
this up.
The topic of this paper is how geologists unraveled the mystery of Japanese vengeance balloon bombs in World War II. Found quite a bit of interesting research on these, and like Harry was saying, like how easy it seemed for them to deploy something that could reach us all the way over here. So during the Second World War, the Japanese conceived the idea of fashioning incendiary bombs and attaching these to balloons, which were released with easterly wintertime jet stream winds above 30,000 feet, float 5,000 miles across the North Pacific. The idea was to have these devices explode over the forested regions of the Pacific Northwest and initiate large forest fires that would hopefully divert U.S. manpower from warfighting in the Pacific theater to combating fires at home. So is Newsom like a Japanese plant? Sorry. These balloons were crafted from mulberry paper, glued together with potato flour and filled with an expansive hydrogen, so dirt cheap. They were 33 feet in diameter, could lift approximately 1,000 pounds, and they carried a 33-pound anti-personnel fragmentation bomb attached to a 64-foot-long fuse that was intended to burn for 82 minutes before detonating. So they programmed them to basically go off once they reached us. Took a whole lot of cool computing of weather patterns and weight and how long the hydrogen that's holding the balloon up will last and yada, yada, yada. So on November 3rd, 1944 is when they started launching these balloons, and they started landing in the U.S. on November the 5th near San Pedro, California. By the following day, they found that they were landing as far away as Thermopolis, Wyoming. There were 285 confirmed landings over like a huge area, like from the Aleutian Islands up here in Canada, like as far as south as Arizona, to Michigan, and almost all of them didn't really do any damage. There was actually one case where there were multiple fatalities, but that was after it had landed. A camping group found this thing in the forest, and they were like, "Oh, hey, what's this? It must be like some kind of weather balloon kind of thing." And they brought it back to their camp, and unfortunately, set off the charge, and they were all killed. What's also very interesting with a lot in regards to a lot of topics that we talk about, especially with the media, back then, obviously there was no internet. There was not even really nationwide news that wasn't greatly delayed by just the speed at which we could get these messages across the states. So the government muzzled the media on what was happening up here in Canada as well, as to not scare people. And it wasn't until I think it was the 70s in which people started finding this out. Sorry, I lost my place. And that camping trip, it was actually in 1945. So several years after these bombs were supposedly supposed to go off. It was a Sunday school who found it on their camping trip.
Is it this one here?
No, that was actually a separate story, but we can segue to that because...
Well, it shows what the bomb looks like, so this is what they basically found.
Didn't it kill the preacher?
The preacher's wife and her Sunday school camping trip. So it was a small group of people. The number doesn't really matter. It was really unfortunate. But, unexploded munitions are a thing. And when you think of the United States, you don't really think about that too much. So it was really, it was a tragic story. I didn't want to harp too much or get too much into detail in it. It's just luckily that it was only the one group and not multiple groups. Most of them were just very harmlessly either exploded and nothing happened, or duds, or were swept out to sea, or a number of things. The ones that they found were completely, I don't want to say safe, but undetonated and were easily taken care of by the government because they were the only ones who really knew what was going on. So once they clued in, they were able to sort of track these things and sort of get an idea of where to start collecting them.
When did the Japanese start the program?
44?
44, so that late. Okay.
Yep. Well, they were getting more and more desperate as time went on.
And,
This was to, again, to just detract people back, not to kill people, but more to pull people off the front lines in the Pacific Theater back home to fight raging forest fires because these incendiary bombs were going off and lighting massive forest fires. But it didn't really work.
And to engender terror.
Yeah, that too.
Reawaken the frightened feel that people had after Pearl Harbor.
It's incredible because they went all the way from Saskatchewan, which is, the flyover area, quote unquote, of Canada, to as far as Mexico. These things hit the entire continent. And in this story, it's just a quick story about how 71 years ago, hey, these things even hit us. And if you scroll down a bit, you can see a little bit of the tangled balloon that was found in Alberta. That one, yeah.
Oh, that's like the one at where are the aliens? It's like the one from Roswell, isn't it?
Yeah, and then if you scroll down a little bit more, you can see that there's a better picture with people on the left there. There's the deflated balloon. There's people for sort of perspective of how big it was. They weren't very big. Obviously, they just had to be just enough to get it over the Pacific to land here. And yeah, it was really crazy. So to sort of segue into the second topic.
Well, hold on just a second. Let's put a bow on this one before you do that. You've got plenty of time. Don't worry about it. This is a great thing because this shows a lot of ingenuity. It's like, how can we mess with our opponents? How can we basically light the West Coast on fire on the cheap? And they came up with a plan and they executed it, but they didn't have computers. Everything was just sort of timers. And in terms of like, well, when to drop the bombs, I don't know. Will it make it? Maybe. I mean, it's actually really hard to do something like this. This is the atmospheric equivalent of putting a message in a bottle and hoping somebody finds it. This is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but they didn't. Luckily, they never really caught anything on fire. They launched all these balloons and nothing of any consequence ever burned.
Nope.
Which is good. But it was enough to get us on our toes in terms of training fire spotters to be on the lookout and training people how to defuse these devices and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, good on us for actually not taking this thing lying down, but thank God it didn't actually work.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've told people, these stories are coming in increasing level of wackiness. They become less and less, more and more slightly insane as time goes on. So the second one is our attempt to basically say, oh yeah, how about we light your entire country on fire? So why don't you tell everybody about the fine bat bomb?
The almost perfect. So the American response, again, like Harry was saying, you come up with some wacky ideas. And one of our the West's sort of response to this was the almost perfect World War II plot to bomb Japan with bats. So imagine a quiet, tense night in the middle of wartime. A plane rips through the air above your city, rupturing the stillness. The bay doors open, and out whistles a bomb. It drops and drops. Everyone braces. But when it explodes, the city's filled not with the flash of impact, but with hundreds and hundreds of tiny whirling bats. This ridiculous vision in which Japanese cities were destroyed by a giant bomb full of bats that were themselves carrying tinier bombs was called Project X-Ray, and it was but a claw's breadth from becoming a reality. So the idea was that you would have these big sort of cage bombs in which they could store like 100 or 150 bats who are hibernating. And how they do this is they just make it cold for them, so they naturally hibernate.
Poor bats. Take a nap.
No. It gets worse.
Yes, kids, they had drugs in the 1940s.
They tied these little tiny incendiary devices to their legs because the perception was that Japanese homes there was a lot of paper and a lot of dry wood, and that they would the bats would nestle up into these places, and then just poof, they would explode into this big roaring fire, and their cities and towns would be. It never happened. But so a little bit of the science behind it was that yes, they were chilled so that they were in hibernation, so they were sleeping, put into these bombs, carried up into the sky where it's still cold, dropped, and then opened like 200 feet above, 2,000 feet above wherever their target was, and these bats would start falling out of the cage, and as it got warmer and warmer because of friction and coming closer to the ground, they would wake up and just start flying and go crazy and go, geez, we need to find shelter. What a dick move, right?
Major.
But it just lends to the creativity of the ingenuity of you have to worry about the biology of the bat, and then again we're sending these quote unquote bombs using that kind of science. It's crazy. It's just so crazy it might have worked. You ditched the article.
I did because I'm having a technical problem.
Okay.
I was going to say, there's probably a do joke in there somewhere for like the Batman theme, but
I'm just trying to
bat
picture
plan.
these bats coming to hurtling toward Earth. You know, it's wow.
It's like, to me, it reminded me of something like out of like a science fiction movie where like the mindless aliens are coming to swarm. They like drop out of the sky out of these pods and wake up and then start attacking the people. And again, just a dick move to do this to animals.
Well, it is a dick move, but look at our image of Japan was like this storybook image of, you know, these houses and these buildings that had like these weird ass kind of curved roofs with these big eaves that would hang over.
And they figured doors and walls.
Yeah, all you have to do is just get the bats to go up and just go hang out under the eaves of these buildings. We figured that the bats would just naturally do a certain thing. We were looking at animal behavior and we thought, how about we just tie tiny little fire bombs to these things and just screw up your whole city?
Yeah, literally was a tiny little fireworks.
Yeah, it really was a baddie idea.
Oh,
it was a baddie idea, and they were saying a little. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you here. Okay,
no. I mean, it's just there's the idea
FDR.
Of the idea of him signing. That's not him signing it, but like him signing, the agreement to use these weapons. But no, go down. And, of course, our cute little furry flying friends. And then down a little bit more. And that would be like the concept of the bomb. So it's like the propulsion or weight or whatever on the back with the propeller. And then the openable cage on the front that would open about 2,000 feet in the air or whatnot.
Well, the part at the back is the guide mechanism, and then of course the altimeter that where normally it'd be just like let's have an air burst and blow this thing up above people because that's a dick thing to do in itself. But instead, just open this thing and let the bats loose. Fly, my pretties, and then
let my bats go.
and then finally the last picture at the bottom there. Go down.
Past this?
Down.
Oh, I thought the burning building
that
was
one.
Good. Okay, there he is.
So that's an actual. So at one point they were actually trying to teach the bats to carry these little incendiary bombs, and this is a photo from the U.S. Air Force of them actually trying to get them to hold on to them, but it was too complex. They're too light. They needed basically like what I said before, a kind of firework that was just very smaller, no bigger than like an M80 that would be fastened, tied to their hind legs. But again, none of this ever happened. It didn't get off the ground, so to speak. It was just
and do you
one
know
of those
why
wacky ideas.
Do you know why it didn't happen? Because this was something they were working on, and I can tell you the reason.
I do.
Oh, you do. Go ahead, you tell.
Because I fell down this rabbit hole for my project.
Go ahead.
It's because should this have worked, it was the fear that they believed the U.S. was doing germ warfare, and that would have opened a whole other can of worms that they didn't want to deal with at the time.
Well, there's also another reason.
Yeah, they were developing the atomic bomb.
Yeah, we had another plan that seemed to be slightly more foolproof. I mean,
this will be better than the bats.
But if you think about it,
nuclear bats.
The Manhattan Project was an enormous undertaking.
Oh my god!
Yes,
it was enormous because, we knew how to make a nuclear device, but we weren't particularly good at it. I mean, it was sort of like trying to upholster a couch with a sledgehammer. We used brute force to basically get something that would work. And
had to build a city in New Mexico.
We had to build a city in New Mexico, and then Oak Ridge, and I mean, we built 3 national
we actually built
laboratories.
3. Yeah, Hanford. Yeah,
and this is actually, I mean, if you think about it, the amount of devastation this could do with just fire, and the fact that it's just so much cheaper. I guess round up some bats, get some firecrackers, woohoo, good times. And the return on investment for this could have been enormous. But I don't think it would have turned the tide of the war. It mostly would have just pissed the Japanese off.
Well, they fancied what happened in Dresden and places like Dresden.
Mm-hmm.
The firestorms. They thought, man, Tokyo will go up like a match. And one of the things they didn't account for, honestly, was the fact that all that the Japanese cities had burned about 100 years before, and they said, building our houses out of paper is a bad idea. We're going to stop doing that. And they stopped doing that.
They finally read the Three Little Pigs, Skep.
Yeah, exactly. So
No
anyway,
kidding.
there you go.
And in the tests, sorry, Gio, and just to finish off, like in the tests of this, it was not very, like, yeah, some of the test ranges, they did their job and they incinerated the whole test range. Like when it worked, it fucking worked on flammable buildings. When it didn't, it went horribly, horribly wrong. Like the bats flying off with these incendiary devices to other places where A, they didn't track, or B, under things like fuel tanks for the local army base. Yeah.
You maybe need to have a timer on those that's kind of like after a certain point this just goes off and then you draw a circle of how far it can fly.
Why are the bats returning home?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
It's a homing bat.
Homing bat.
Natural behavior.
Look,
I'm
I have
sorry,
something for you.
Were you about to
Daddy,
say
I'm
else?
home.
Don't make me regret asking you.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely Manhattan Project was a lot more reliable than the Manbattan Project.
Yes, thank
Oh,
you.
That was a
Well,
good
that
one.
was
Very good. Well
Well
done.
That was a good one.
Assassin of the Grey points out the incendiary bombing campaigns where General Curtis LeMay conducted in the Pacific were extremely effective. Yeah, incendiary bombing campaigns have a tendency of being extremely effective.
Yep.
But this was one of those things where we were just going to try to do it on the cheap instead of sending a whole bunch of bombers with a whole bunch of ordnance. It was just here you go. It's just an interesting idea, and this is the kind of thing that people do when they really feel like we better do something or we might just lose. And it brings out the best and the wackiest of people. I mean, we had amazing people working during World War II.
Oh,
Actually, maybe we might talk about how we broke the purple cipher sometime. That would be a really fun discussion for me because I love that kind of stuff. There's some great other stories from World War II, but this is only kind of the wacky, out of the box thinking things tonight. So go ahead, Functional, because I'm going to hand it over to Skep when you're done.
Well, just to thank you for giving me these because I didn't know about either of these.
Cool.
So it was something new that I learned, and it was also something entertaining that it was just like, okay, this actually happened in history. I can see this coming out of like, I don't know, feudal Japan or like Viking times, but like
Can we get some applause for Cannibalistic Wizard? Oh God, I feel so bad. How did I miss that joke? Damn
That's
it.
beautiful.
So
Thank
that was
you,
awesome.
Cannibalistic Wizard.
That was excellent. Okay. So you're done, Functional?
Indeed.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the work you put on in this.
Next
It's-
week,
It's fun.
vampires.
No, but it's fun. I mean, looking into stuff.
Totally fun.
Anytime you can get into a rabbit hole, because all of these things are things that have rabbit holed me at one time or another. So that's
Dude,
how I know
found
they're rabbit hole
hundreds
worthy.
of articles for. It was hard at first. Thank you for giving me enough time to sort of go through and which one was sort of the best article for each and would lend itself to the other one.
Well, you're very welcome.
And found some other fun stuff too that I might propose.
You're gonna love Skeps though. This is the one that Skep is gonna do is one of my all-time favorites.
It's creme de la weird.
It is so beautiful. So please go right ahead.
Oh, well, let me take you back to the middle part of World War II, around 1941, 1942. Things had changed a bit for the Germans. They no longer had the, devastating air superiority of the Luftwaffe, and they were not thinking about invading Britain anymore. They were thinking more about, holy shit, things are turning against us. And the Allies were thinking more about, I think if we just bomb the shit out of Germany, they might just give up. But we don't have a long range enough bomber to hit them and have enough loiter time and things like that. What we really need is some kind of base up in the northern part of the North Sea that we could base bombers off of and go bomb Germany and base fighters off of to escort the bombers. What will we do about that? Well, that was the need that they had. Enter one Jeffrey Pike. Jeffrey Pike was a guy who started, he clearly was some kind of a genius. He was very erratic. He had an amazing life up to that. He had been a war correspondent during World War I, had been captured by the Germans, escaped from the Germans, made his way back to England, had been involved in the development, just because he's a gadfly inventor, brilliant guy, had been involved in the invention of a screw-powered ice sled, basically, that was going to get people around in the snow very quickly, and his work gained him the reputation as somebody who knew a lot about ice and cold water and things like that. So all this combined to him being presented with the problem of what can we do to get a big aircraft landing and storage and takeoff platform up close enough to Germany where we can bomb the shit out of them. And he said the same thing that you're probably saying to yourself. Let's make the aircraft carrier out of water. That's what he said, and that's what he did. So the idea was to actually essentially make a giant floating block of ice, hollow it out, put motors off to the side of it because they would be too warm to embed in the ice itself. So they would be outboard of this thing. Mm-hmm. Put a gigantic 100-foot long rudder in the stern, and this thing would be propelled along at about 6 knots through the water. Would actually be mobile. Would be 2,000 feet long. Okay, the runway would be 2,000 feet long. Now I want you to think about the aircraft carriers of the time. Their landing runway was typically about 100 feet long. This thing would have been gigantic. It wouldn't have been an aircraft carrier. It would have been an airport made completely out of ice. Wow. His problem was that ice melted. How to make ice that doesn't melt. And here was the brilliant part. He consulted with a guy named Peretz, who eventually was a physical chemist, almost without peer at the time. He would go on to win the Nobel Prize in chemistry, by the way, in, I think, 1962. Anyway, and they devised a way to add wood pulp to water and make something that he modestly referred to as Pikecrete. His name was Jeffrey Pike, and this was actually stronger than concrete in many respects. And so he called it Pikecrete. And it was really kind of a brilliant solution. It kept the ice melted much, much slow enough to where he could actually do proof of concept testing with a 1,000-foot long model that he created up in one of the northern Canadian lakes, like Patricia Lake, I believe it's called. And this thing was really starting to take shape when, unfortunately, the British decided to add extra fuel tanks to their bombers. And that, as they say, was the end of that. The need evaporated, and so did his idea. But this amazing device was pursued quite a bit. The politics behind it was interesting too, because the way that this happened was Peretz was friends with Lord Mountbatten. Mountbatten had a lot of influence with Winston Churchill. Mountbatten was taken with this idea. He just thought it was great. He took it to Winston Churchill. And Churchill said, "Yeah, let's follow this up. If you think this is a good idea, let's give it a shot." So this had backing from the highest levels of the British government. And as far as I'm concerned, making an aircraft carrier out of ice is just one of the most astounding ideas I have ever heard. There's so many things wrong with that. So many things they would have discovered had they actually produced a prototype. Icebergs turn over. Okay, you have a lot of problems with center of mass, center of buoyancy. There are a lot of seamanship type problems that you have to solve in order to make this thing work. Plus the fact that even with Picrete, over time it will begin to heat transfer is a thing. It will begin to melt. But his solution to that, and this is one of the things that I just love about this story, his solution to the melting, wait for it, was to put a refrigeration system on the giant block of ice. So he would actually run a complicated set of ducts and refrigeration systems through the ice itself to keep it cold enough. It was just it was a very interesting idea, and it got dangerously close to being attempted. As I said, they did an actual 1,000-foot long scale model of the thing before cooler heads prevailed, so to speak. And they said, wait a minute, we've got enough range in our bombers now. Thanks, but no thanks. And the idea melted away into history.
There aren't many problems that you can't throw enough fuel at, right?
Absolutely right.
It does give a whole new meaning to the idea of give me a cold one, if they manufacture these en masse.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age.
But let me
This
just
is something out of Batman. Like
I do want to share something with you. Share one my screen, and that is it's a Chrome tab, and it is this is the schematic of the HMS Habakkuk.
I have that one. Oh, where's he? Right there. There. Probably a little clearer this way.
Okay.
That's the one, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's it.
Okay.
And you can see that thing is 2,000 feet long. Okay, that is 3 times longer than the deck of the Essex class carriers that they had of usable deck that they had. And the planes at the time didn't take that long a runway to land on, especially if they were turned into the wind. But here was one of the things that they would have had to contend with. They needed the longer runway because an Essex class carrier would make about 35 knots, I believe, if memory serves, through the water. And what that means is that you have a 35 knot headwind to land into. So it shortens the amount of runway space you need to land. And those planes were landing at 50, 60 miles an hour. I mean, you literally would have a net speed over the deck of 30 or 40 miles an hour to land. It's pretty easy landing to manage. This thing would have had a top speed of 6 knots an hour. Very expensive to run. Basically has to sit dead in the water most of the time, and you land according to whichever way it happens to be oriented at the time, which is probably going to be from wind astern, if the thing, to the extent that it even had a stern that was different from its bow. It will act a little bit like a weather vane. And so you'd be landing with a tailwind. So you would need the extra runway to do it. But the thing would have been a mess. I mean, you couldn't control it with the waves that would be hit. You'd hardly be able to orient the thing. Plus the fact, how do you maintain the motors that are outward that are mounted on the outside of the ship below the water line?
dolphins with tool belts, obviously.
Well,
Kind-
clearly, but Skep. Now, Doolittle, with that insane man, didn't he take like army bombers and take them off from an aircraft carrier?
Yes,
I think
he
maybe
did.
Yes,
they
he
were
did.
trying to have
Yes,
this extra
yes.
room so they could essentially put
Basically
land-based bombers on this and not just be confined to
You
carrier
could take
type
off,
aircraft.
but you
right,
couldn't land.
right.
So that's
yeah.
why it's
yeah.
that's why it's a floating island, not an aircraft carrier.
They were
Right,
supposed
but
to. Go,
yeah,
they were supposed to
and-
go to China.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly. And Doolittle, as Prospero pointed out, knew that he was going to take off, but he could not land on the carrier that he just took off from. So if they'd had a problem, they were going to ditch and do the best they could.
They were
Yeah,
ditch in the
it-
China Sea.
It was a
and
one.
then-
Yeah, it was a one-way
back.
mission.
Yeah, but I mean,
hopefully
if they had an engine failure right off the bow, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah,
they had a ditch
they were
right
going
there.
in the drink.
Exactly. They couldn't land, and they were told, "You can't land. You know, don't do that. You'll disable the fucking carrier."
I can't wait to see who they cast for Doolittle in the Netflix adaptation.
Oh god.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
think that sounds like you're
A
just
fat
about
lesbian
done
of
here.
color. Yeah.
Are we good?
Yep, we're good. That was
Thank
my
you. I love
presentation.
this story. I love this story so
I
much.
do take issue with Skep's pronunciation. You didn't pronounce the name right. It's HMS, not H.
It's
Hey,
H. Well, then I'll come
Hey.
back at
HMS.
you. It's not San Pedro. It's San Pedro.
Exactly.
Is how you pronounce San Pedro, California. Just so you know.
Yeah.
I used to put in there.
Let's
local.
see.
Yeah, it is a local
Affectation.
At least nobody's talking about Louisville. So
Louisville.
Louisville. Serenity's not with us tonight to keep us on the
Or
straight and narrow.
Darien, Connecticut.
So I believe this takes us to.
Excuse me, I am a southerner.
I think Sora is up. Is Sora with us, or she's
I am.
muted? There you
I'm
are.
sorry, I'm just staying muted because the dogs keep running back and forth. So,
Okay.
but I'm here.
Go ahead and post any links in the private chat that you want me to share. And
So hold on a sec. I don't have an article because I read
Then-
his actual.
well, there's a video. I
Yeah,
believe.
there is a video which will spoil things.
Yes.
So you
but
can
you,
hold it
please, I'm going to hold
on-
off. You send me the link when you're ready.
Let me share my screen because what I will be talking about
Oh.
is what Sassin already mentioned in the chat. Pigeon guided missiles. Because World War II is awesome. So we're going to start with this. Just this lovely, lovely gentleman. I want window. There we go.
All right.
All right. So here we have B.F. Skinner, who is considered to be one of the 20th century's most eminent psychologists.
Not
Not by anybody that cares, but yeah, go ahead.
And the reason for that is for his study in behavioralism, specifically positive reinforcement. So that's where he is coming from, specifically coining the term operant conditioning. And he took this operant conditioning into what was known as Project Pigeon. So what happened at the start of the Second World War? Well, we found out that airships, airplanes, have become a very devastating weapon. The siege of basically the complete devastation of Warsaw really hammered home to everybody, all the allied nations, that, hey, we need to have a better either security or better bombs. So a lot of people wanted to get into this kind of not really an arms race per se, but more of a technological race to help win the war. And one of the big things that was the problem back then is how do we better lock onto a target from an airplane that's carrying the bombs, right? They had all sorts of pulleys, levers, weights, contraptions that currently was helping to sort of orientate the bombs as they were being dropped on a target. However, unfortunately, they would have a very wide mark. So they wanted something to narrow it down. And at the time, sort of actual electronic guided missiles were not yet reliable. So this would come in the next 5-6 years. But at this time, so we're looking at 1941 now. It's not yet, it's going to take another 10 years actually before electric guidance became most reliable. So you had a lot of people asking for grants to do all sorts of interesting innovations in warfare. And one of these people were Skinner and his team, who had been working on conditioning pigeons. So prior to this, he had worked with rats. So he had a experiment called Skinner's box, where basically it was shown that you could change the behavior of an individual, or in this case a rat, by positive and negative reinforcement. So positive meaning they do an action you want, they are awarded with food. They do an action they don't like, and they're harmed in some way, like a zap of electricity. Usually, through this experimentations, it was found that positive reinforcement actually garnered faster recognition of the patterns that he wanted them to follow. So with birds are often mistaken to be kind of dumb, but they're actually very, very smart. So are pigeons quite smart? They're quick to pick up on patterns, quick to focus, and hard to distract once the conditioning sets in. So what he used to do for these pigeons was basically harness them up in little flight suits.
Aww.
So little harnesses where their bodies, wings, and legs were encased in a little jacket, and they were suspended. So only their necks and heads were able to be moved. By movement, their bodies, the sort of harness would hit on little contacts, which would be in theory what would move the bomb should they get to that stage. Now I have a couple more pigeons, a couple more pictures of that because they are adorable. They really, really are adorable. I can't. I'm going to stop screen, but I will share again.
Okay.
Share again.
This. All right. All right. So there's a dozing pigeon in a little jacket. So what he used to do was on a little sort of dial, they were trained to peck at a little circle. Every time they would peck on a circle, they would be awarded with food. And this started with them pecking around the circle, and the closer they got, the more accurate the pigeons got, the better food the more food they were awarded with, until they became unbelievably accurate in the tapping. And from then on, a projection of battle cruisers, planes, all sorts of things would be projected into a little lens for them to tap away. And again, time and time again, they'd be more and more accurate. And to make sure that they were not distracted, they would do white noise generators. They would shoot guns by the birds to see if they would be distracted by noise. All sorts of things. And they would stay on target. And they were also minimally distracted by shapes such as clouds or other big shapes. They would be very, very quick and to recalibrate themselves to find the target, because to them, they knew food was coming, which is a high value, especially if they were hemp hearts, by the way. Hemp seeds were apparently the highest value food for pigeons.
Slackers.
Stoners.
Now, what was very, very interesting is when they were awarded some grant money, they were actually under partnership with General Mills, because by himself, Skinner, nobody wanted to give him any money. Of course, this is ridiculous. What do you mean you're going to condition pigeons to go to war? No, we're not going to give you money for this. But General Mills Incorporated, wanted to join the war effort, wanted to start sort of supporting America in this. So they said, okay, we know somebody, come work with us. Let me, because we're a bigger corporation. Give me something, write something for me, and let's take it to the government. And so they did. And were awarded $25,000 to start building this contraption that you see here. They actually moved into the loft of a flour mill owned by General Mills, and that's where all this experimentation took place, on top of a flour mill, which I think was very interesting. So within about 6 months of being given this grant money, they were able to actually put together a prototype of the bomb that they would be using. Now, the bomb that they were building, they were not giving any specifications. It was the Pelican type bomb. The reason it was called Pelican was because of the type of body it showed. So it was rather a sleek bomb, and all the incendiary stuff was at the nose, hence Pelican.
Its beak could hold more than its belly can.
Exactly.
At least they didn't use cats.
Yeah.
So sorry, it's so small.
They vocalize too much, Skep.
Yeah.
So this is what the Pelican bomb unmodified looked like. They were never given any sort of blueprints of this, because that would have been too dangerous. They only really knew what the nose would look like. Now, what Skinner did was he retrofitted this. He changed how it looked like to allow for a capsule where they could insert the pigeons. Now, the way they jerry rigged this was like a type of camera obscura. So it was like a pinhole camera that was able to, through reflection and mirrors, reflect back to the pigeon the image that they wanted to attack. So they would be able to, with contacts, they put some contacts on the beaks and everything. They would tap, 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 tap at the screen and basically keep the bomb steady. And when released, in theory, it would land on the target. Now, I say in theory because they never, ever actually tested it in the field. So no pigeons died in the making of this experiment. They never actually got that far, because by the time that they started presenting all this information, they decided that, oh, hey, we've got other bombs that we're going to do. We're not going to give our efforts to you. So they removed funding for a couple of years. But yeah, so let me show you some more. I just love this stuff. I really do. Now, for anyone who might be horrified, and you might have been horrified about the bat story as well, Skinner, in his write-up in the American Psychologist journal, when asked about the ethical question about what's the right to convert lower creatures into an unwitting hero, he called it a peacetime luxury. Now we may sit and declare this to be barbaric, but at the time, they were all scrambling for something to help them win. So it's very easy to say this is horrible, whereas at the time, it was necessary. It was either pigeons or you're experimenting on people, and that wasn't going to happen.
Well, the Japanese were actually using people in a not experiment. I mean, a kamikaze is a human being doing this.
Mm-hmm.
We were trying to use pigeons instead of people. So I feel like the moral high ground was probably on our side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and our parks were a little cleaner.
So this is the nose of the pelican as changed by Skinner. If you can see, there's 3 compartments. Each of these compartments would hold a pigeon. And on the left here, as you can see, they would be tapping right on here. They would be suspended in this little capsule, which would have their body connected to electrical contacts, excuse me. And as they would swivel their heads, it would move their body, and that would guide the bomb. So there were little bubble heads, and that would be the direction. Now, in the event that one of or 2 of the 3 would not be looking the right direction, they would have started retrofitting some ideas of if one doesn't follow the pack, they would be punished to keep all 3 of them in the same direction. But that wasn't really fully realized before funding was cut at the time. So there's that one. And just to show how they actually were.
Well, that's actually very clever because I didn't realize that there were 3 pigeons in a bomb.
1 was not enough because
Clearly.
the reason, and so you can see this is him inserting 1 pigeon into the first compartment. The reason you needed more than 1 pigeon is you had to have redundancies. So if you had only 1 pigeon and the pigeon had an aneurysm or decided that he was falling asleep that day, you no longer had a functioning guided bomb. Whereas with 3, there was a higher chance of success because you'd have 2 versus 1 should one decide to not peck correctly.
So they never
So hence
altitude
the 3.
tested the pigeons at all.
I think there was one design too that they had even more than 3 compartments.
Were the pigeons aware that there were other pigeons in the bomb?
I would assume so because they were often like this.
Yeah.
I will show you the beautiful picture.
Because I wonder if there's a possibility of pigeon groupthink.
Mm.
You know, and literally just veering off, because we just all had the same idea at the same time.
Birds of a feather flock together.
This is how they were staffed.
It's
in
a
their little
homing
blankets.
pigeon.
Yeah.
There was he had 62 main pigeons that he experimented on. And they were all very, very, very smart, apparently.
What variety of pigeon were they?
That's a good question. His paper doesn't specify.
I wonder if they were similar to the passenger pigeons, which I guess were probably... When did they go extinct? When did passengers pass? Between the wars, wasn't it?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think so.
The amount of stuff I don't know about pigeons, apparently.
Can you really ever know enough?
They did when they went for their final showcase. They
1914.
One of the pigeons that they had in the bomb, or not in the bomb, in the carrier case to show to the Division of Science there, had been strapped up for 35 hours because one of the concerns was that the pigeons would freak out if left in there for a prolonged period of time. And this one pigeon was there for 35 hours and was still able to function and pass the tests in person. Now, this is quite funny, they had an absolutely perfect showcase. They had the data, they had the bird demonstrate everything, and of course everybody laughed because this is a crackpot idea. It's a pigeon poking at a screen with very good accuracy, but it was still a pigeon, right?
Mhm.
So they were told, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed your $25,000, but we're going to cut your funding now. And that was sort of the end of Project Pigeon. So, and however,
he taught pigeons to play ping pong.
Oh, yes, he did. That's very cute. that's a bit of a different one. He also he had fun. I should say before all of this, when he started his studies, he was kind of under. He was supposedly under one professor and then another professor, and it was one of those situations where one department thought he was with another department and vice versa. So he was basically given unfettered access to all sorts of experimental stuff that he could do because nobody thought to check who was actually taking care of, like who's paying attention to Skinner. So he did a lot of stuff unsupervised. And then we did this stuff after. While at Harvard. This is all while at Harvard, by the way.
This is what happens when there's not enough adult supervision in the,
exactly.
in the psychology department.
So he called the what they were doing, the poking, the prodding, as shaping. So he shaped the minds and sort of the behavior of the pigeons to go from dots to warships through the projections of these images. And it was something that, even a few years later, the same birds who had been retired for 5-6 years were still able to pick up. So that's part of the conditioning aspect of it. They were able to pick up where they left off, which was great because the Navy decided to restart the program under the title of Project Orcon. So the reason for this is that, again, they were thinking whether or not homing systems, we're right now, it was around the beginning of the Cold War. So we're ending the Second World War. That's done. But at the same time, the arms race has not finished and the brewing of the Cold War is beginning. So they're still desperate. We're still desperate to have some consistent missiles, like direction missiles. And again, this is before 1953. Around 1953, electric guidance systems became more reliable, so we could do away with the pigeons. But he was reinstated to try to do by the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington. They gave him again some grants and to try to see how, to replicate his World War II experiments. This time with a bit more like I guess secrets given. So like whereas with in Second World War, they didn't really give him a lot of information on the type of targets he was aiming for or what kind of bombs he was using. They gave him a little bit more information this time around. But again, after a couple of years, they decided that, you know what, we're gonna cut it as well. So he had twice the ability to try, but they both times cut his funding. So that was the end of everything. And a few years after that, it was declassified. So he was able to publish a paper talking about his time training pigeons for war.
He's like the Susan Lucci of weapons development.
I do have a. If you want to see them in action, if you'd like to share that video.
Do we need
there's no sound. There's no sound in that video.
Okay.
It's just archives from his lab.
All right. Well, where's the link?
Oh, a little further up, sorry. It's here. I'll
Let's see. Geo's just sent me a link.
Oh, yes, he did. That's the one.
Is that the right one?
Yes.
Okay. I know I'm going to regret trusting you people someday. Oh, here we are. Project Orcon. All right. Switch this over. We're so high tech. Maybe I can get a pigeon to run this show. That would be great.
He used rock pigeons.
Oh, okay.
Just so you know.
Here we go. Project Orcon.
And there's a little pigeon. He's getting a contact applied to his beak. Look how cute. Oh, so cute.
Oh.
He has a stylus. It's very nice.
Yes.
He's like, I don't know why I'm here. I
have no idea what I'm doing.
I don't, but the food is great.
There he's in his little pigeon hammock.
Yes.
After they were decommissioned in just before it was in 1944, in January 1944, they were decommissioned. As you can see here, he is shown to be accurate, and then they get the seeds.
Hemp seeds.
Righteous hemp.
He's way more accurate than the Norden bomb site was.
Yeah, that's mostly because people didn't know how to use the Norden bomb site. It was too goddamn complicated.
Yep.
What am I looking at?
Oh, I think he's showing like the accuracy, perhaps.
Ah, yes.
Mm.
It's good to have highly accurate pigeons.
You know, you're a pigeon in this, and you say, well, I like the hammock. It's comfortable. The food is good. The work is easy. Where do I poop? Don't worry about that. You're not. Why not worry about that?
I like to have a clean and orderly workplace. I'm a very professional pigeon.
Exactly. Bio breaks are a thing. Yeah.
Once your job's over, it'll all be cleaned up. Don't worry.
Yeah. It'll be clear to you then.
I have a dumb question. So, I mean, these are things that fly, so presumably they can dive and they're used to some amount of Gs. But I would think that an aerodynamic bomb would pull a lot more Gs potentially than a pigeon is used to. Did they ever actually put pigeons in one of these things and drop them just to sort of see if they got disoriented?
They replicated some movement. They didn't drop them per se. I think they just basically, you know, like those fake, how like they train astronauts in those
the vomit
centrifuge kind of things. It was sort of
flying
something like that.
Parabolic course. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This looks like a really early version of Mystery Science Theater.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you can see, so that's the reflected image of a ship. And they're supposed to just... Oh, another thing is endurance and stamina. So they're basically, as long as the image is on the screen, they cannot stop. So they have to peck right on it until the image is gone.
And then they get the food pellet.
And then they get the food, yeah.
That's awesome.
So those are the pigeons. But while doing this, there's a couple of more very fun, cute asides. I don't know if we have time. They're very, very short things.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We have time.
Wartime and animals. Now, one of the inspirations for this came out of First World War, where the British trained seagulls to hunt submarines by having the British go into harbors, go around the coasts, and releasing fish, like dead fish and all sorts of food, yummy, that seagulls like, so that all the seagulls around the coast would look for these vessels. And when they found the vessels, they would congregate, right, to eat. So people, the soldiers on the shore or watchmen on the shore would look for flocks of seagulls to see whether or not there's any enemy in the water. So that was sort of like a big thing. Very, sort of not so scientific conditioning in that there was no laboratory there, but it was rather, it was an effort to sort of save the coast. So then we have our pigeons here. We had the incendiary bats that was talked about earlier. And we also have other fun things, such as these are urban legends of the Second World War. I should say that there were stories that went around, but whether or not there's a lot of truth to that, do your own research. Russians were training dogs to blow up tanks. There was a Swedish proposal to use seals to detonate submarines, which apparently wasn't successful. And the Russians were also said to have trained sea lions to cut mine cables. Because the only way to
opposable thumbs.
They were strapped with shears.
Oh.
They had shears strapped onto them, and the only way to eat was to go through wherever the mine lines, excuse me, lay, and they had to get through them. By doing so, they would cut the line, and they'd get to food. So yeah.
So when do the sharks with the lasers show up?
I see. I think that would be post Cold War.
Yeah.
I think, because that's the next one.
Yeah.
Real shame that.
That's cool. I like the idea of making animals fight our wars for us.
Oh, yeah. I like the idea of flying pterodactyls with machine guns.
Sort of like a Pern crossover kind of thing. Is that?
Yeah,
what
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of going that way. Yeah, exactly.
God. No. All right. Well, thank you, Sora. Thank you,
Thank
Skep.
you.
And thank you, Functional. Applause.
It was very fun. Thanks for letting us do that.
I just
That was
wanted to do
great.
something a little bit different.
Yeah, that was fun.
Excellent.
War
So,
can be fun.
war
See?
can be fun. It's the fun side of war. Let's see. In this moment, Harry realized he just described the premise of Pokemon. No, unfortunately, I realized it sounded a lot more like the anime Gate, but I don't watch anime, so I wouldn't know anything about that. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So, while we're on the fun stuff, I thought this was fun. The CIA is on a mission to get more social media followers.
Oh my god.
They should take off their clothes.
Maybe they'd be big on TikTok.
Only spies.
Get a bunch of them like in that
Yes.
lobby with the stars for all the fallen agents, and then they could just, in front of that memorial wall, they could just start doing TikTok dances. That would be super classy.
Yeah.
Only Spies is better than the one that I was thinking of. Only
Yes.
Spooks, but that could be misinterpreted.
Hopscotch, Walter Matthau. That's a good spy movie.
Now I can just imagine a bunch of Instagram videos and TikTok videos to the theme of Secret Agent Man.
Oh yeah, that's a great song.
Johnny Rivers.
Of course, that was sold in the U.S. as Danger Man, which is a dumb title.
Yeah.
So the CIA wants to crack the code to Instagram popularity to soften up its shadowy image as part of a quirky new public relations campaign.
God.
Have you
According
tried
to a
not being
report
asshole?
Wednesday, the notoriously tight-lipped agency is on a mission to gain more followers and likes on its social media platforms, including Twitter and Facebook. How about MySpace? I hear all the kids are into MySpace now. In order to portray itself as relatable, Politico reported the CIA is ramping up its social media presence, which began in 2014 to help dispel negative press and conspiracy theories that have plagued it in recent years, said Candace Bryant, head of the agency's social media team. There's people who don't realize that we have a softer side here, said Bryant, 37. So our audience is really the entirety of the American public. The goal is demystify, educate, and recruit, she said. Recent Instagram posts from the CIA include images of a gay pride flag along with captions stressing the importance of retaining agents with every cultural and linguistic background. They also include first-person stories from CIA employees with hashtags such as hashtag humans of CIA and hashtag Women's Crush Wednesday.
Had they paid
I love
Curly's
this so much. This is horrible.
Have
It
they
is.
paid Curly's time and royalties yet for Nobody Does It Better?
Oh, yeah. That's a good
it's
Bond
so
movie.
much cringe.
But
This
the
is
efforts to present the
terrible.
CIA as just like us have drawn criticism from observers, some of whom say makes the agency look weak or guilty of whitewashing its own history. I don't know about you. Whenever I see something that's like makes the CIA look kind of shadowy and kick-ass, that makes me like them more.
Yes.
You know, I mean,
That's what they're supposed to do.
that's what I want. I want to hear about, like the director of, the DNI calling people in and yelling at them and saying, get me some actionable intelligence, and then they send John Krasinski off to Taliban land to get some info or something. I want to see that. I don't want to see
Jack Ryan walking into a room
Yeah.
and going, "Hello, fellow kids," is not what you want to see.
No. It wouldn't be Jack Ryan anymore. He'd be canceled for being a white cis man.
Oh, that's true. It has to be that lady with bipolar disorder or whatever it was. Who was empowered to work for the CIA. Remember that ad? Oh no, she had generalized anxiety disorder. Just what you want, the yips in a spy.
Yes, exactly. Oh my God,
like,
that's so funny.
I was like, I have generalized anxiety disorder, and I work for the CIA, and I'm like, oh
dear
shit.
God.
You feel confident now?
I think maybe we now have the explanation for why an aid worker in Afghanistan got whacked by a drone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of Biden's best work.
Kill it, it's moving.
That guy with the thing in the car with the stuff. Yeah.
He's loading stuff in the car. Well, we gotta kill him.
Oh. Well, I think we are at the end of the show. I mean, I've got more stuff, but we're pretty much at 2 hours, so I think it is time for us to call it. Does anybody have anything they would like to share before we say goodnight to everybody?
Nah.
We're good?
Mm-mm.
Yep, I'm good.
Well, thank you again to my panel. Thank you, chat. You guys amused the crap out of me tonight, chat. So, I mean, I appreciate it. Makes it a lot easier. With that, the zoo is closed. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.